The champagne glass shattered. Not by accident. Elena Whitford set it down too hard, and the crystal exploded across marble, like her composure threatening to do the same. Across the ballroom, Adrian Blackthorne stood with his hand on another woman's waist, his eyes locked on Elena, as if the past year, the silence, the abandonment, the night she'd spent learning not to cry, had never happened. Everyone was watching now. She could leave. She could stay. She could burn this whole damn room down with the truth neither of them had spoken. If you want to know what she chose, and what it cost her, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks ago. Heavy cardstock with gold embossing that screamed old money and older secrets. Elena had almost thrown it in the fire. Almost. The annual Whitmore Gala. Black tie. No exceptions. She'd attended this event every year since she turned 18. It was where the powerful came to remind everyone else they were powerful, where business deals were made over $1,200 whiskey, where marriages were arranged with the subtlety of corporate mergers. It was theater, and everyone knew their role. Except this year, Elena didn't know what part she was supposed to play anymore. "You don't have to go," Margot said, perched on the edge of Elena's bed while her friend stood before the mirror in a dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Emerald green silk that clung and flowed in all the right places. War paint, really. Everyone would understand. Would they? Elena adjusted an earring, diamond inherited, cold against her skin. Or would they whisper about how I'm still broken, how I couldn't face him? Screw what they think. Easy for you to say. You didn't spend 12 months rebuilding yourself from scratch. Margot's expression softened. She was the only one who'd seen the wreckage. The version of Elena who'd stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped being for a while after Adrian disappeared. No explanation. No goodbye. Just gone. Like she'd meant nothing. "You're not that person anymore," Margot said quietly. Elena met her own eyes in the mirror. No, she wasn't. The woman staring back had learned to be harder, sharper. The kind of woman who could walk into a room full of people who'd watched her get discarded and hold her head high. "No," Elena agreed. "I'm not." The Whitmore estate blazed with light, a Georgian mansion that had witnessed 2 centuries of excess and ambition. Elena's driver pulled up to the entrance, and she took one last breath before stepping out. Flash photography erupted immediately. Society journalists who made careers out of documenting who arrived with whom, who wore what, who'd survived scandal, and who hadn't. She smiled. Not too wide. Just enough to suggest she had secrets and wasn't sharing. Inside the ballroom was exactly as she remembered. Soaring ceilings, chandeliers dripping crystal, an orchestra playing something classical and forgettable. Servers circulated with champagne and canapes. Women in gowns worth down payments on houses. Men in tuxedos that fit like they'd been born wearing them. Elena accepted a glass from a passing tray and scanned the room with the strategic eye of a general surveying a battlefield. Elena Whitford, as I live and breathe. She turned to find Charles Hendricks, a banker with more connections than morals. He'd always been harmless, lecherous in that way rich old men thought was charming, but ultimately toothless. "Charles, still buying your way into events you're not important enough to be invited to?" His laugh was genuine. "Still have that sharp tongue, I see." "Good. I was worried you'd lost your edge." "People keep worrying about me. I can't imagine why." "Can't you?" He leaned in conspiratorially, bourbon on his breath. The whole Adrian Blackthorne situation was rather dramatic. There it was, less than 5 minutes in, and someone had already brought him up. Elena sipped her champagne, buying time to control her expression. "Ancient history, Charles." "Is it? Because I heard—" "You heard wrong," she cut him off smoothly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I see someone I actually want to talk to." She didn't, but Charles didn't need to know that. Elena moved through the crowd with practiced grace, stopping to exchange pleasantries with people she mostly couldn't stand. Victoria Chen, who'd made a fortune in tech and never let anyone forget it. Robert Ashford, old money trying desperately to stay relevant in new industries. The Carmichael twins who threw legendary parties and catastrophic tantrums in equal measure. Everyone was polite. Everyone was curious. Everyone wanted to know if she was okay. She wanted to scream. Instead, she smiled and deflected and made small talk about the weather, about the upcoming charity auction, about anything except the question they all really wanted to ask. What happened with Adrian Blackthorne? She'd been nursing the same glass of champagne for 45 minutes when she saw him. Adrian Blackthorne stood near the orchestra, taller than she remembered, or maybe she'd just tried to make him smaller in her memory. Dark hair swept back, sharp jawline, eyes that could cut glass or seduce angels depending on his mood. He wore his tuxedo like armor, perfectly tailored, perfectly controlled, and his hand was on the waist of a blonde woman Elena didn't recognize. The room tilted, just slightly, just enough that Elena had to lock her knees to keep from swaying. He was looking directly at her. The woman beside him was beautiful in that effortless way that came from good genetics and better skin care. She was laughing at something Adrian had said, her hand resting on his chest with the casual intimacy of someone who had the right to touch him. Elena should look away. Should turn and find Margot, who was somewhere in this crowd, probably charming some poor fool out of their investment portfolio. Should do literally anything except stand here staring like she'd been struck. But she couldn't move. Adrian said something to the blonde woman. She nodded, squeezed his arm, and drifted away toward the powder room. And then Adrian started walking. Toward Elena. No. Absolutely not. She turned sharply, intending to lose herself in the crowd, but there were too many people and nowhere to go that wouldn't look like running. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it over the orchestra. Elena. His voice. She'd forgotten how it sounded, dark and smooth like expensive whiskey. Or maybe she'd tried to forget. She turned slowly, arranging her face into polite indifference. Adrian, I didn't realize you'd be here. A lie. She'd known. The guest list for the Whitmore Gala was public record among their social circle, and she'd tortured herself by reading it 3 times. I didn't realize you would be either, he said, which was also probably a lie. You look alive? Functional? Not destroyed by your disappearing act? Something flickered across his face, pain maybe, or regret. I deserve that. You deserve a lot more than that. The orchestra finished one piece and began another. Around them, people were starting to notice their conversation, heads turning with barely concealed interest. Tomorrow's society pages would be delicious. Can we talk? Adrian asked quietly. Privately? I don't think that's a good idea. Please. There was something desperate in his tone that caught her off guard. Adrian Blackthorne didn't beg, didn't plead. He commanded, decided, acted, and the world rearranged itself to accommodate him. 5 minutes, Elena heard herself say. And if you waste them, you'll never get another chance. He nodded, relief washing over his features. The study. You remember where? I remember everything, Adrian. That's the problem. The study was exactly as Elena remembered. Dark wood paneling, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a desk that had probably witnessed more deals than a Wall Street trading floor. She'd been in this room before, a lifetime ago, when things between them had been different, simpler, before. Adrian closed the door behind them, and suddenly the room felt too small. Your date seems lovely, Elena said, because attack was always better than defense. Does she know you have a habit of abandoning women without explanation, or is that a surprise you're saving for later? Sophia isn't... We're not... He ran a hand through his hair, destroying its perfect styling. She's a friend. Her presence tonight is... strategic. Strategic. How romantic. Elena, no. She held up a hand. You don't get to Elena me. You don't get to show up after a year of silence with some woman on your arm and expect... What? Forgiveness? Understanding? An explanation for why I wasn't worth a goddamn goodbye? You were worth everything, Adrian said, and the rawness in his voice almost broke through her defenses. Almost. You are worth everything. That's why I had to leave. That makes absolutely no sense. I know, but if you let me explain... I let you explain once. I let you tell me you loved me, that I was different, that you wanted a future with me. And then you vanished like I was a mistake you needed to erase. Elena's voice was shaking now, anger and hurt bleeding through her carefully constructed armor. Do you have any idea what that did to me? What it's like to wake up every day and wonder what you did wrong? What made you so unlovable that someone could just leave? You did nothing wrong. Adrian took a step toward her, then stopped when she stepped back. Everything that happened, me leaving, the silence, it was never about you. Then what was it about? He was quiet for a long moment, and Elena could see him calculating, deciding what to say and what to keep hidden. Even now, he was keeping secrets. There are things happening, he finally said. Dangerous things. Things I couldn't drag you into. So you made the decision for me. How noble. I was trying to protect you. I didn't need protection. I needed honesty. I needed you to trust me enough to let me make my own choices. If I'd told you the truth, I would have stood by you. That's what you do when you love someone. The words hung in the air between them, and Elena wanted to take them back immediately. Loved, past tense. Adrian flinched. I don't believe that. Believe what you want. You've clearly gotten very good at constructing your own reality. Elena, please, just listen. The door opened. Sophia stood in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes were sharp, assessing. Sorry to interrupt, she said, not sounding sorry at all. Adrian, Mr. Whitmore is asking for you. Something about the foundation donation. Tell him I'll be there in a moment. He was quite insistent. It was a dismissal wrapped in politeness, and they all knew it. Adrian looked at Elena, silently pleading for more time. Your 5 minutes are up anyway, Elena said coolly, and I've heard enough. She walked past him, past Sophia, back into the ballroom where at least the lies were honest. Society games she understood, power plays she could navigate. But whatever Adrian was offering, explanations wrapped in half-truths, protection she'd never asked for, she wanted no part of it. Margot found her 20 minutes later, standing on the terrace in the cold night air. There you are. I've been looking everywhere. She stopped, taking in Elena's expression. What happened? I talked to him. And? And nothing. Same Adrian, same secrets, same assumption that he knows what's best for everyone. Margot pulled her wrap tighter against the chill. What did he say? That he left to protect me. That there are dangerous things happening. That I'm worth everything, but apparently not worth the truth. Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. A year, Margot. A year of silence, and that's what I get. Do you believe him? That he was trying to protect you? I don't know what I believe anymore. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the city lights below. Inside, the party continued, music and laughter, and the clink of crystal, people living their perfect, curated lives. Are you going to talk to him again? Margot asked quietly. Why would I? Because you're still in love with him. Elena wanted to deny it, wanted to say that love had died somewhere in the 12 months of silence, in the nights spent trying to understand what she'd done wrong, in the slow, painful process of learning to be whole again. But Margot knew her too well for lies. Doesn't matter, Elena said instead. Love isn't enough. It never was. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in avoidance. Elena threw herself into work. She ran a small but successful art gallery that specialized in emerging artists and pretended that Adrian Blackthorne didn't exist. It would have worked, except that he apparently had other plans. Flowers arrived at her gallery, expensive arrangements that she immediately donated to a local hospital. Then handwritten notes, which she burned without reading past the first line. Then gifts, first editions of her favorite books, a vintage bracelet she'd once admired in a shop window, things that proved he'd been paying attention even when she thought he'd forgotten everything. She sent them all back. You're being stubborn, Margot observed one evening as Elena packaged up another returned gift. I'm being smart. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, you're punishing yourself as much as you're punishing him. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm setting boundaries. You're building walls. Same thing. Margot sighed. Elena, I love you, but you're being an idiot. Excuse me? You heard me. Look, what Adrian did was terrible. Leaving without explanation? Unforgivable. But he's trying to explain now and you won't even listen. I listened at the gala for 5 minutes in a room where anyone could interrupt. That's not listening. That's checking a box so you can feel justified in your anger. Elena set down the package harder than necessary. Whose side are you on? Yours? Always. Which is why I'm telling you that this, she gestured at the pile of returned gifts, isn't healing. It's just a different kind of pain. So what am I supposed to do? Just forgive him? Pretend the last year didn't happen? No, but maybe hear him out. Really hear him. And then make a decision based on the full picture, not the one you've constructed from hurt and imagination. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to explain that she'd already heard enough, that nothing Adrian could say would change what he'd done. But a small, honest part of her, the part she'd been trying to ignore, knew Margot was right. She'd been so focused on protecting herself from more pain that she hadn't considered what she might be missing. If I do this, and I'm not saying I will, but if I did, what would I even say? Margot smiled. Start with, I'm listening. The rest will follow. 3 days later, Elena sent a single text message to the number that had been appearing on her phone with increasing frequency. You have 1 hour. My gallery, tomorrow at 8 p.m. Don't be late. His response came within seconds. I'll be there. She didn't sleep that night, just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was making a terrible mistake or finally doing something brave. In the darkness, it was hard to tell the difference. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Elena rearranged the same display 3 times, reviewed contracts she'd already approved, did everything possible to avoid thinking about the evening ahead. It didn't work. At 7:45 p.m., she sent her assistant home and locked the front door. The gallery was quiet, just her and the art, and the weight of 13 months of unspoken words. Adrian arrived at exactly 8 p.m. She watched him approach through the window, long coat against the evening chill, hands in pockets, expression serious. He looked tired. Good. She hoped he'd lost as much sleep as she had. She opened the door before he could knock. 1 hour, she said by way of greeting, and I reserve the right to kick you out earlier if you waste my time. Understood. He followed her into the gallery's main room. She didn't offer him a seat, didn't offer anything except a place to stand and speak his piece. For a long moment, Adrian just looked at her, really looked, like he was trying to memorize every detail, or maybe trying to find the words he'd been rehearsing. I don't know where to start, he finally said. The beginning usually works. The beginning, he laughed softly without humor. The beginning is my father's death. 5 years ago, officially ruled a suicide, a tragedy, a cautionary tale about the pressures of power and wealth. Elena remembered. It had been all over the news. Marcus Blackthorne, titan of industry, found dead in his study. Adrian had been devastated, had thrown himself into managing the family empire with a kind of desperate intensity. Officially ruled, she repeated, catching the qualifier. Meaning it wasn't suicide. It was murder. The word hung in the air between them, heavy and violent. Adrian, let me finish, please. He took a breath. For 5 years, I believed the official story. Believed my father had given up, had chosen to leave us. It destroyed something in me. And then, 18 months ago, I found evidence. A letter he'd hidden, documents that didn't make sense, financial irregularities that pointed to something much bigger than suicide. What kind of evidence? The kind that suggested my father had been investigating someone powerful, someone who'd been using Blackthorne Industries as a front for illegal operations, money laundering, arms dealing, things that would have destroyed everything he'd built if they came to light. Elena's mind was racing. Who? His name is Victor Castellane. On paper, he's a philanthropist, an investor, a pillar of the goddamn community. In reality, he's the head of a criminal network that spans 3 continents, and my father found out. So Castellane killed him, made it look like suicide, buried the evidence, and took over the operations my father had been trying to shut down, using Blackthorne Industries as his cover. Adrian's hands were clenched into fists. I spent a year investigating, confirming, building a case, and the deeper I dug, the more dangerous it became. Why didn't you go to the police? Because Castellane owns half the police, judges, politicians, prosecutors. He's spent decades building a network of people in his pocket. Going through official channels would have been suicide. So you disappeared instead. I disappeared to protect you. He stepped closer, and Elena's breath caught. Castellane has a pattern. Anyone who gets too close to the people investigating him becomes leverage. Wives, girlfriends, children. They disappear or they die, and suddenly the investigation stops. You think I couldn't handle myself? I think I couldn't handle losing you. Not like that. His voice cracked. I'd already lost my father. If something happened to you because of me, because you were close to me. So you made the choice for me. Decided I was too fragile, too weak to stand beside you. I decided you were too important to risk. That's the same thing, Adrian. Don't you see? You looked at me and saw someone who needed protecting instead of someone who could be your partner. Your equal. You're right. The admission seemed to cost him. I was wrong. I should have trusted you, should have given you the choice. But I was terrified, and I made a decision I thought would keep you safe. Elena turned away, arms wrapped around herself. Everything he was saying made a terrible kind of sense, but it didn't erase the hurt, didn't undo the damage. The woman at the gala, she said quietly. Sophia. She's part of this? She's ex-MI6, been helping me navigate Castellane's network. Make connections, build the case. And the relationship? The touching? The intimacy? Theater. Castellane has been watching me. If he thought I was alone, vulnerable, he'd have moved against me already. Sophia plays the devoted girlfriend, and it keeps him thinking I'm distracted, weak. Are you sleeping with her? The question came out harsher than Elena intended, but she needed to know. No, there's never been anyone else, not for a single moment. She wanted to believe him, wanted to accept this explanation and move forward. But trust was a fragile thing, and hers had been shattered so completely. What happens now? She asked. Now I finish what my father started. I have enough evidence to bring Castellane down, to expose everything. But it has to be done right, done publicly so he can't make it disappear. When? Soon, weeks, not months. Elena turned back to face him. And then, Adrian hesitated. I was hoping I could have another chance, with you, to do this right. I don't know if I can. I know, but I had to ask. They stood in silence, the gallery's art surrounding them like witnesses to this moment. Elena thought about the past year, the pain, the rebuilding, the person she'd become in his absence. She thought about the woman she'd been before, the one who'd loved easily and trusted completely. She wasn't that woman anymore. And maybe that was okay. I need time, she finally said. To think, to process all of this. Take all the time you need. And I need honesty, complete honesty. No more decisions made for my own good, no more protection I didn't ask for. If we're going to anything, it has to be as equals. Equals, Adrian repeated. I can do that. Can you? Because everything you've told me tonight suggests otherwise. You've been operating alone for a year, making unilateral decisions, deciding who needs to know what and when. You're right. Again. He smiled slightly. You're going to keep being right, aren't you? Get used to it. The hour was up, maybe past up, but Elena didn't move to show him out. Tell me about the evidence, she said instead. How you plan to expose him. The details, Adrian. All of them. His expression shifted, surprise, then something that looked like hope. Are you sure? I'm not promising anything except that I'm listening, really listening, like I should have at the gala. So talk. You have until I say otherwise. And Adrian talked. About the investigation, the evidence he'd gathered, the plan to expose Castellane at an upcoming charity event where every major media outlet would be present. He talked about the risk, the potential for everything to go wrong, the people who were helping him, and those who'd betrayed him. Elena listened, asked questions, pointed out flaws in his reasoning and gaps in his plan. They debated strategy, discussed contingencies, argued about timing and approach. It felt like breathing after being underwater too long. When Adrian finally left, well past midnight, Elena locked the door behind him and leaned against it, exhausted and exhilarated in equal measure. She didn't know what came next, didn't know if trust could be rebuilt or if love could survive what they'd been through. But for the first time in a year, she knew the truth. And that was something. Her phone buzzed with a text from Margot. "So?" Elena smiled and typed back. "He told me everything. And I'm still deciding, but you're considering it. Progress. Maybe. Or maybe I'm an idiot. Those aren't mutually exclusive. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, we plan. Plan what? Whatever comes next. Together. That's what friends do." Elena looked around her gallery. The space she'd built, the life she'd created in the wreckage of heartbreak. She'd done it alone, had proven she could survive without Adrian Blackthorne. The question now was whether she wanted to. The decision came to Elena at 3 in the morning, the way most reckless ideas did, fully formed and impossible to ignore. She sat up in bed, reaching for her phone before her rational mind could talk her out of it. The text was simple, direct. "I'm in. But we do this my way too, not just yours." Adrian's response came so fast he must have been awake. "What did you have in mind?" "Meet me at the gallery. 9 a.m. Come alone." She didn't wait for his reply before setting the phone down. Her hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline or fear, maybe both. For a year she'd been careful, controlled, rebuilding herself into someone who didn't need anyone. And now she was about to throw herself into exactly the kind of chaos she'd sworn to avoid. But the alternative was worse. Walking away, always wondering what might have happened if she'd been brave enough to step forward instead of back. By the time Adrian arrived the next morning, Elena had already rearranged the gallery's back office into something resembling a war room. Her laptop was open, notes scattered across the desk, a pot of coffee that was more necessity than luxury. "You've been busy," Adrian observed, taking in the organized chaos. "I don't do anything halfway. You should remember that." He smiled, but it was tentative, testing the waters. "I do remember. It's one of the things I don't." Elena held up a hand. "We're not doing sentiment right now. We're doing strategy." "Right. Strategy." She pulled up a file on her laptop, spinning it around so he could see. "I spent the last 6 hours researching Victor Castellane. Everything public, everything you can find if you know where to look. His foundation, his investments, his associates." Adrian leaned in, scanning the information. "This is comprehensive. I'm good at research. It's how I find emerging artists before anyone else does. You dig deeper than the surface, look for patterns, connections." She pulled up another window. "Castellane has his charity gala coming up in 3 weeks, the Prometheus Foundation event. That's where you're planning to expose him?" "That's the plan. Maximum visibility, maximum witnesses, minimal chance of it getting buried." "It's a good plan," Elena admitted, "but it's incomplete." "How so?" "You're thinking about the exposure, getting the information out there, making it public, but you're not thinking about what happens after. Castellane doesn't just have money and connections, he has lawyers, good ones. The kind who can make evidence disappear, witnesses recant. Entire cases collapse." Adrian straightened, his expression shifting from defensive to interested. "You have a solution?" "I have the beginning of one. You need more than just evidence. You need leverage, something that makes it impossible for him to fight back without destroying himself in the process." "Like what?" Elena pulled up another file, this one containing screenshots of social media posts, news articles, photographs. Castellane's daughter, Isabella, 23, just finished graduate school at Oxford, currently working for her father's foundation. "I know who she is." "Do you know she's been quietly documenting irregularities in the foundation's finances for the past 8 months? That she's been asking questions her father's accountants won't answer?" Adrian stared at the screen. "How did you find this?" "Her private Instagram account, very private, only about 30 followers, mostly friends from university. She's been posting vague references to family complications and ethical concerns. Nothing specific enough to be damning, but enough to suggest she's not blind to what her father is." "You want to recruit her?" "I want to give her a choice. Right now she's trapped in her father's world, probably scared, definitely isolated. If we approach her correctly, not as enemies but as people offering her a way out, she might help us. And if she doesn't? Then we're no worse off than we are now. But if she does, if we can get her to testify or provide additional evidence from the inside. Elena let the implication hang. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, and Elena could see him working through scenarios, calculating risks. It was the same expression he'd worn when they used to play chess: intense focus, strategic thinking. It's risky, he finally said. Approaching her puts her in danger. If Castellane finds out, he finds out that his daughter is disloyal, which he probably already suspects. Adrian, the man killed your father. You think he'd hesitate to control his own child if he thought it was necessary? No. Which is exactly why involving her feels wrong. Everything about this situation is wrong. The question is whether we're brave enough to make the hard choices. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. An understanding, maybe? A recognition that they were both willing to do difficult things for the right reasons. Okay, Adrian said. How do we approach her without tipping off Castellane? Elena was already pulling up another file. Isabella volunteers at an art therapy program for at-risk youth every Thursday evening. Small nonprofit, very low-key. I donate to them occasionally, and I've met the director. One phone call, and I can arrange to accidentally run into her this week. Just like that? Just like that. Rich people love coincidences that make them feel connected. I'll mention my gallery, talk about supporting emerging artists, maybe hint that I'm looking for someone to help curate a special exhibition. It's the kind of opportunity someone like Isabella would be interested in. And then I feel her out. See if she's as conflicted as her social media suggests. If she is, I plant the seed. If she's not, I back off and we find another angle. Adrian shook his head slowly, but he was smiling. A year ago, you were planning gallery exhibitions and reading novels. Now you're plotting corporate espionage. A year ago, I thought I knew who I was. Turns out I was wrong. Elena closed her laptop. People change, Adrian, sometimes because we want to, sometimes because we have to. Is this you changing, or is this who you always were underneath? The question caught her off guard. She'd been so focused on survival, on rebuilding, that she hadn't stopped to consider whether she was becoming someone new or finally becoming herself. I don't know, she admitted. Does it matter? It matters to me. I need to know if you're doing this because you want to or because you think it's what I need. Elena stood, moving around the desk until she was directly in front of him. I'm doing this because a man murdered your father and has been profiting from it for 5 years. Because he's still out there, still dangerous, and someone needs to stop him. And yes, I'm doing it because the man I loved is asking for help. And maybe, there's still something worth saving here. Between us? Between all of it. Us, the truth, whatever future we might have. She took a breath. But I need you to understand something. I'm not the woman you left behind. I'm not going to follow your lead and trust that you know best. If we do this, we're partners. Equal say, equal risk, equal everything. Equal everything, Adrian repeated, including the danger. Especially the danger. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was warm, familiar in a way that made her chest ache. Then we're partners, he said quietly. No more secrets, no more protection you didn't ask for. From here on out, we make decisions together. Elena squeezed his hand once, then let go. Good. Now let's figure out how to destroy Victor Castellane. The next 3 days were a blur of planning, research, and careful preparation. Margot was recruited immediately. Her background in finance made her invaluable for understanding the shell companies and money trails Castellane had hidden behind. This is insane, Margot said cheerfully, spreading documents across Elena's dining room table. Also potentially illegal. Also, I'm completely in. It's not illegal if we're exposing crimes, Elena argued. Tell that to the judge if we get caught breaking into financial databases. We're not breaking in. We're creatively accessing public information. Adrian, working on his own laptop across the table, snorted. That's not going to hold up in court. Good thing we're not planning to get caught then. Sophia appeared on the second day, bringing additional intelligence and a level of professional competence that made Elena both grateful and slightly jealous. The woman moved through the world with the kind of confidence that came from training and experience, not trial and error. "You must be Elena," Sophia said, extending a hand. "I've heard a lot about you." "All good, I hope." "Mostly catastrophic, actually. Adrian was a wreck when you weren't speaking." She said it matter-of-factly, without judgment. Good to see him functional again. Elena wasn't sure how to respond to that, so she changed the subject. "Adrian says you're ex-MI6. Officially, I'm a private security consultant. Unofficially, I specialize in making bad people very nervous." Sophia pulled out a tablet, already moving into business mode. "Adrian brought me up to speed on the Isabella approach. Smart play. Risky, but smart. You think it'll work?" "Depends on the girl. If she's genuinely conflicted about her father's business, she might jump at the chance to do the right thing. If she's more loyal than principled," Sophia shrugged, "we'll need a contingency plan." They worked late into the night, building strategy on top of strategy, backup plans for the backup plans. Elena had never been part of something like this. Coordinated, high stakes, potentially dangerous. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Thursday arrived faster than Elena expected. She dressed carefully for the art therapy program. Expensive but not ostentatious, the kind of outfit that suggested success without screaming wealth. Margot had insisted on coming along, playing the role of assistant. "You don't have an assistant," Elena had pointed out. "I do now. Besides, two of us makes it seem more legitimate, less like a setup." The art therapy program operated out of a community center in a neighborhood that had seen better decades. Inside, the walls were covered with student artwork, bright, chaotic, honest, in the way only children's art could be. Isabella Castellane was easy to spot. She had her father's sharp features, but her mother's softer coloring, and she moved through the room with practiced ease, helping students with their projects, offering encouragement. Elena waited until Isabella was between students before approaching. "Excuse me? Isabella Castellane?" The young woman turned, polite but cautious. "Yes?" "I'm Elena Whitford. I run the Whitford Gallery downtown. I've been looking for someone to help curate a new exhibition focused on therapeutic art programs, and the director mentioned you might be interested." Recognition flickered across Isabella's face. "The Whitford Gallery. I've been there. You had that incredible show last year, the Emerging Sculptors from the Midwest? You remember that?" Elena was genuinely surprised. It had been a small show, critically acclaimed, but not exactly mainstream. "I remember thinking it was one of the few gallery exhibitions that felt authentic. Like the curator actually cared about the artist, not just the sales." "I did care. I do." Elena gestured around the community center. "Which is why I'm interested in this kind of work. Art as healing, not just commerce." They talked for 20 minutes about art, about the program, about Isabella's graduate work in arts administration. Margot stayed strategically in the background, playing the supportive colleague role perfectly. "Would you like to grab coffee sometime?" Elena asked as the conversation wound down. "Talk more about the exhibition idea? I'd love to hear your thoughts on structure, artist selection, that kind of thing." Isabella hesitated, and Elena could see the calculation happening. Opportunity versus obligation, personal interest versus family expectations. "I'd like that," she finally said, "but it would need to be discreet. My father has strong opinions about where I spend my time." "Of course. No publicity, no social media, just two people talking about art." They exchanged numbers, made tentative plans for the following week. As Elena and Margot left the community center, Margot waited until they were in the car before speaking. "She's scared of him." "Yeah." "Did you see how she looked around before agreeing to coffee, like she was checking for surveillance?" "You think Castellane monitors her that closely?" "I think powerful men with criminal empires don't leave loose ends, even if those loose ends are their own children." Elena pulled out her phone, texting Adrian. "Contact made. Coffee next week." "She's definitely conflicted." His response came quickly. "Good work. Be careful. Always." Margot glanced over. "So what now?" "Now we wait. Give her a few days to think about it, to decide if meeting with me is worth whatever trouble it might cause. And if she decides it's not, then we find another way." Elena started the car. We always find another way. But Isabella did meet her for coffee at a small cafe far from her usual haunts, far from anywhere her father's associates might frequent. She arrived early, already seated in a corner booth when Elena walked in. "Thank you for coming," Elena said, sliding into the seat across from her. "I almost didn't." Isabella wrapped both hands around her coffee cup like it was anchoring her. "I should probably ask why Elena Whitford is really interested in having coffee with Victor Castellane's daughter. So much for subtle. What makes you think there's a hidden agenda?" "Because nobody in my world does anything without an agenda. And because I've seen the way people look at my father, like they're afraid of him, or indebted to him, or both. You looked at me like you were looking for something specific." Elena had to admire the directness. She'd been prepared to dance around the subject for weeks, feeling Isabella out slowly, but maybe honesty was the better play. "You're right," she admitted. "I do have an agenda. The question is whether you want to hear it, or whether you'd rather walk away now and pretend this conversation never happened." Isabella was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Tell me. Your father is a criminal. He's been using the Prometheus Foundation and various business connections to launder money, facilitate illegal arms deals, and cover up murders, including the murder of Marcus Blackthorne 5 years ago." She'd expected shock, denial, anger. Instead, Isabella just closed her eyes briefly, like she'd been waiting for someone to finally say it out loud. "You have proof?" she asked quietly. "We're building a case. Financial records, witness testimony, documentation of illegal transactions. Enough to expose him publicly to make sure the truth comes out." "Who's we?" "Adrian Blackthorne, Marcus's son, plus some people who specialize in bringing down men like your father." "And you want what from me? Testimony? Inside information?" "I want to give you a choice," Elena said carefully. "Right now you're trapped. You suspect what your father is, what he's done, but you're too close to act. You benefit from his wealth while hating where it comes from. I'm offering you a way out. By betraying my family. By stopping a man who's hurt countless people and will hurt countless more if nobody stops him." Elena leaned forward. "Isabella, I've seen your social media posts, the questions you've been asking about the foundation's finances. You already know something's wrong. Suspecting and proving are different things, which is why we need your help. You have access we don't. Files, communications, people who trust you because you're Castellane's daughter." Isabella laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're asking me to wear a wire, basically, to spy on my own father. I'm asking you to do the right thing, even though it's the hardest thing. Easy for you to say, he's not your father. No, but if he was, and I knew what he'd done, I'd like to think I'd be brave enough to stop him." They sat in silence for a while. Around them, the cafe continued its normal rhythm, orders being taken, conversations humming, the espresso machine hissing. "If I did this," Isabella finally said, "if I helped you, what happens to me after? When my father's in prison and I'm the daughter who put him there?" "We protect you. New identity if necessary, financial support, whatever you need. You can't protect me from who I am. From what people will say." "No," Elena admitted. "But you can decide who you want to be moving forward. You can choose to be the person who stood up, who refused to let evil hide behind family loyalty." Isabella pulled out her phone, scrolling to something, then turned it to show Elena. It was a photo. Young Isabella, maybe 8 years old, sitting on her father's shoulders at what looked like a beach. Both of them were laughing. "I used to worship him," she said softly. "He was my hero. And then I grew up and started seeing the cracks, the phone calls he'd take in another room, the men who'd visit late at night, the way people were afraid of him." "When did you know for sure?" 6 months ago. I overheard him on the phone talking about handling someone who'd become a liability. 2 days later, that person's car went off a bridge. Her hands were shaking. Officially ruled an accident, but I knew. "Isabella, I need time to think about this, to figure out what I can live with. We don't have much time. The gala is in 2.5 weeks. Then I guess I better think fast." She stood abruptly, gathering her things. Elena started to protest, to push harder, but something in Isabella's expression stopped her. I'm not saying no, Isabella said, but I'm not saying yes either. Give me 3 days. I'll contact you either way. And if your father finds out we talked, then you'll read about my unfortunate accident in the papers. She said it flatly, without drama, just fact. Elena watched her leave, disappearing into the midday crowd, and felt her stomach drop. She pulled out her phone, calling Adrian immediately. How did it go? He answered. She knows about her father, about what he is. She's known for months. Is she going to help? I don't know. She's scared, Adrian, really scared. She basically told me that if Castellane finds out we talked, she's dead. Then we need to protect her. How? We can't put a security detail on her without raising suspicion. We can't move her somewhere safe without her father noticing. She could hear Adrian thinking, that particular quality of silence that meant he was working through options. Sophia, he finally said, she can do discreet surveillance, make sure Isabella's safe without being obvious about it. For 3 days? For however long it takes. Elena leaned back in her chair, exhaustion washing over her. This is getting complicated. It was always going to be complicated. The question is whether it's worth it. Is it? Be honest with me, Adrian. Is bringing down Castellane worth putting that girl's life at risk? He was quiet for so long she thought the call had dropped. If we don't stop him, he finally said, how many other lives does he destroy? How many other fathers, daughters, families? I think about that every day. The people my father might have saved if he'd exposed Castellane sooner, if he'd been less afraid. Your father wasn't afraid. He was murdered.
Fictional.
He was murdered because he waited too long, tried to build a perfect case instead of acting when he had the chance. I won't make the same mistake. There was something in his voice, not quite rage, but close to it, the kind of anger that had been burning cold for 5 years, waiting for a chance to ignite. Adrian, Elena said carefully, we need to be smart about this. Rushing because you're angry at a dead man won't help anyone. I'm not rushing. I'm finishing what should have been finished years ago. By putting Isabella at risk? By putting all of us at risk? By doing what's necessary. Elena closed her eyes. This was the Adrian she'd worried about, the one who'd disappeared into obsession, who'd convinced himself that the ends justified any means. If you're going down that road, she said quietly, you're going alone. Silence. Then, what? You heard me. I said I'd help you bring down Castellane, not that I'd help you destroy yourself in the process. If you can't see the difference between justice and revenge, if you're willing to sacrifice that girl because it makes your plan easier, then count me out. Elena, I mean it. Call me when you're thinking clearly. She hung up before he could respond, before her own resolve could weaken. Her hands were shaking again, but this time it was pure adrenaline. Margot appeared in the cafe doorway 10 minutes later. Elena must have texted her, though she didn't remember doing it. What happened? Margot asked, sliding into the booth. I think I just walked away from Adrian. Again. Good. Elena looked up, surprised. Good? He needs someone who'll call him on his shit. Someone who won't just follow along because they're scared or in love or both. Margot signaled for coffee. What did he do? Elena explained. The conversation with Isabella. Adrian's single-minded focus on bringing down Castellane regardless of collateral damage. He's not wrong that Castellane needs to be stopped, Margot said when Elena finished. But he's not right about how to do it either. So what do? We do what we've always done. We figure it out ourselves. Over the next 3 days, Elena and Margot worked independently of Adrian, building their own strategy. Sophia checked in periodically. She'd been assigned to watch Isabella and reported that the young woman seemed to be going through her normal routine, if a bit more paranoid than usual. Adrian called 17 times. Elena answered exactly 0 of them. On the 3rd day, Isabella texted, I'm in, but I have conditions. They met in the same cafe, same booth. Isabella looked like she hadn't slept, dark circles under her eyes, hands wrapped around yet another coffee cup. I'll help you, she said without preamble. I'll get you the files you need, wear a wire if necessary, testify if it comes to that. But you have to promise me something. What? When this is over, when my father is exposed and arrested and everything comes out, you protect my mother and younger brother. They don't know. They're not part of this. How can you be sure? Because my mother spends most of her time sedated on prescription drugs, trying to ignore what her life has become. And my brother is 15 and still thinks our father is a hero. They're innocent, and I won't let them be destroyed because of what I'm about to do. Elena thought about it. Protecting people who might not deserve protection, who'd benefited from Castellani's crimes even if they hadn't participated directly. I can't promise they won't be affected, she said honestly. When something like this breaks, everyone close to Castellan will face scrutiny, but I promise we'll do everything we can to minimize the damage to them specifically. That's not good enough. It's the best I can offer. The truth is messy, Isabella. It hurts people who don't deserve it sometimes, but hiding it hurts more people in the long run. Isabella closed her eyes, took a shaky breath. Okay, when do we start? Right now. Elena pulled out a small device from her purse, a recording pen Sophia had provided. This is voice activated. Slip it into your pocket, your bag, wherever you can access it quickly. When you're alone with your father, when he's talking business, turn it on. What if he searches me? He won't. It looks like a regular pen. Besides, you're his daughter. He thinks you're loyal. I was loyal for a long time. Isabella took the device, turning it over in her hands. This feels wrong. I know. But it's still the right thing? Yeah, it is. Isabella left first, the recording pen hidden in her jacket pocket. Elena waited 10 minutes before leaving, standard protocol to avoid being seen together. She was halfway to her car when Adrian appeared, stepping out from between two buildings like he'd been waiting. We need to talk, he said. I don't think we do. Elena, please. I was wrong. About pushing too hard, about not considering the cost. You were right to call me on it. She stopped walking. You scared me, Adrian. For a minute there, you sounded like you were willing to do anything to get Castellane, and I mean anything. I know. I heard myself after you hung up. Sophia played back the conversation, made me listen to how I sounded. He ran a hand through his hair. My father's death has been driving me for so long that I almost forgot why I was doing this. It's not about revenge. It's about making sure he didn't die for nothing. And Isabella? She deserves protection. She deserves the chance to make her own choice, not to be used as a pawn in someone else's war. Elena studied his face, looking for the obsession she'd heard on the phone 3 days ago. It was still there, the anger, the determination, but it was controlled now, directed. She's agreed to help, Elena said, on the condition that we protect her mother and brother when this goes public. Done. Whatever they need. I gave her a recording device. She's going to try to get her father on tape discussing his operations. Adrian's expression shifted from relief to concern. That's incredibly dangerous. I know, but it was her idea, and she's right that we need more than just financial records. We need him admitting to crimes in his own voice. When? Tonight, if possible. Castellane is hosting a small dinner at the house, business associates, potential investors. Isabella thinks he'll talk more openly with her there than he would otherwise. Sees her as part of the scenery. That's in 4 hours. We need to prepare. For the first time in 3 days, they were on the same page. Elena followed Adrian to a safe house Sophia had arranged, a nondescript apartment with reinforced doors and surveillance equipment that would have impressed a paranoid dictator. Sophia was already there, setting up monitoring systems. The pen has a range of about 50 feet, she explained, pulling up a screen that showed a map of Castellani's estate. We'll position ourselves here, she pointed to a spot just outside the property line, and record everything Isabella picks up. What if something goes wrong? Elena asked. What if Castellane suspects something? Then Isabella aborts, gets out of the house, and we fall back to Plan B. What's Plan B? We expose Castellane with what we have and hope it's enough. Not exactly reassuring. The next 4 hours were the longest of Elena's life. She paced, drank too much coffee, checked her phone every 30 seconds. Adrian was equally restless, reviewing files and strategy until Sophia finally told them both to sit down and shut up before she sedated them. At exactly 7 p.m., Isabella's signal went live. They heard everything. The sound of dinner conversation, clinking glasses, polite laughter. Isabella's voice, asking if anyone needed more wine. Her father, dismissing her with casual affection. Then, after the guests left, the real conversation began. "How much did we move this month?" Castellane's voice, deep and commanding. Another voice, male, older. 14 million through the Cyprus accounts. Another 8 through the South American operation. The Blackthorn situation? Contained. The son is making noise, but nothing actionable. He doesn't have the evidence he thinks he has. Elena felt Adrian tense beside her, his jaw clenched so tight she worried he might crack a tooth. Castelaine laughed. Marcus thought he was clever too, right up until he wasn't. You sure it was necessary? Killing him made waves. Made them break, you mean? With Marcus gone, Blackthorn Industries fell right into line. His son is too busy playing detective to actually manage the company effectively. It's perfect. Isabella's voice, small and careful. Father? I was wondering if I could ask you something about the Foundation's finances. Silence. Then Castelaine's voice, harder now. What about them? I've been reviewing the quarterly reports, and some of the expense categories don't quite add up. You thought maybe you'd question my business practices. In my own home? I wasn't questioning, you were overstepping, again. The sound of a chair scraping back. Isabella, you're a bright girl, but you have a tendency to see problems where there aren't any. The Foundation's finances are perfectly legitimate. Of course. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to... Go to your room. We'll discuss this later. Footsteps. A door closing. Then Castelaine's voice again, quieter but no less menacing. She's becoming a liability. You want me to handle it? She's my daughter. I'll handle it my own way. The transmission cut off. Elena's blood ran cold. We need to get her out of there, now. Sophia was already moving, grabbing equipment, calling for backup. Adrian was on his phone, coordinating with additional security. How fast can we reach her? Elena demanded. 10 minutes if we break every traffic law. Then break them. They piled into Sophia's car, a nondescript sedan that turned out to have an engine that could outrun most sports cars. Sophia drove like she'd trained for it, which she probably had, weaving through traffic with surgical precision. Elena's phone buzzed, a text from Isabella. He knows. I need help. Another buzz. Please. He's coming. Faster, Elena urged, though Sophia was already pushing 90 on a residential street. They made it to Castelaine's estate in 8 minutes. The gates were open, unusual for a property that usually had security tighter than a military base. Sophia pulled up to the main house, and they all jumped out. The front door was ajar. Inside, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Isabella, Elena called, not caring about discretion anymore. A crash from upstairs, glass breaking. They took the stairs 3 at a time, following the sound to a bedroom at the end of the hall. The door was locked, but Adrian kicked it open with one hit. Isabella was backed against the window, her father advancing on her with something in his hand. A gun. Get away from her, Adrian said, his voice deadly calm. Castelaine turned, and for a moment, Elena saw genuine surprise cross his face. Then it morphed into something uglier. Adrian Blackthorn, right on time, he gestured with the gun. Come to play hero like your father? We saw how that turned out. Put down the weapon, Sophia commanded, and Elena noticed she had her own gun drawn, trained on Castelaine with the steady hands of someone who'd done this before. You're going to shoot me in my own home, in front of witnesses? Castelaine laughed. I don't think so. We have recordings, Elena said, stepping forward despite every instinct screaming to stay back. Everything you said tonight. Admitting to Marcus's murder, the money laundering, all of it. It's over. Nothing's over until I say it's over. And then everything happened at once. Castelaine turned the gun back toward Isabella. Sophia fired, hitting him in the shoulder. He went down hard, the gun skittering across the floor. Adrian lunged for it while Elena ran to Isabella, pulling her away from her father. You're okay, Elena said, even though Isabella was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering. You're safe now. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Sophia must have called them the moment they entered the property. Castelaine was on the floor, clutching his shoulder, his face twisted in rage and pain. You think this changes anything? He spat. I own this city, Judges, prosecutors, police chiefs, you'll never make any of it stick. Maybe not all of it, Adrian said quietly, standing over him with the gun pointed at the floor. But enough. More than enough to destroy everything you've built. The police arrived moments later, followed by paramedics, followed by what seemed like half the city's media presence. Elena stayed with Isabella through all of it, the statements, the questions, the flash photography that turned the whole scene into a surreal nightmare. It was nearly dawn when they finally left Castellane's estate. Isabella was being relocated to a safe house, her mother and brother already en route to a secure location. The recordings had been handed over to the district attorney's office, along with the financial evidence Margot had compiled. Elena found herself in the back of Sophia's car again, Adrian beside her, both of them too exhausted to speak. Her phone buzzed. A news alert. Victor Castelain arrested in connection with money laundering, murder charges. It was happening. Actually happening. We did it, she said quietly. We did, Adrian agreed. Together. She looked at him, really looked, and saw someone different from the man who'd disappeared a year ago. Someone who'd learned that strength wasn't the same as control, that trust meant letting other people take risks too. What happens now, she asked. Now we make sure the charges stick. We protect Isabella and her family. We rebuild. And us? Adrian took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. That's up to you. I meant what I said, no more unilateral decisions. We figure this out together, or not at all. Elena thought about the past weeks. The fear, the anger, the moments when she'd almost walked away. But also the partnership, the trust slowly rebuilding, the realization that she didn't have to choose between being strong and being vulnerable. Together, she said finally. But if you ever disappear on me again, I won't. I swear I won't. The sunrise was breaking over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. A new day, a new start. Elena leaned her head against Adrian's shoulder and let herself believe for the first time in a year that maybe everything would be okay. But in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that Victor Castelain wasn't the type to go down quietly, and that the real battle might be just beginning. That small voice turned out to be prophetic. The bail hearing happened 48 hours later, in a courtroom packed with journalists, curious onlookers, and half of the city's legal establishment. Elena sat in the gallery beside Margot, watching as Victor Castelain, impeccably dressed despite the shoulder wound, expensive lawyers flanking him like guards, stood before the judge with the kind of confidence that made her stomach turn. Your Honor, Castelain's lead attorney began, my client is a pillar of this community, a philanthropist, a business leader, a family man. These charges are based on dubious recordings obtained through illegal means and the coerced testimony of a troubled young woman. Troubled? Elena hissed. Margot grabbed her arm before she could stand. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine Morris, who'd built her career on taking down white-collar criminals, stepped forward. Your Honor, the defendant is charged with murder, conspiracy, money laundering, and racketeering. The evidence includes detailed financial records, witness testimony, and recordings of the defendant admitting to these crimes. He is both a flight risk and a danger to witnesses. My client has deep roots in this community, the defense attorney countered. He's not going anywhere. The judge, an older man Elena didn't recognize, reviewed the documents in front of him with agonizing slowness. Finally, he looked up. Bail is set at $50 million. The defendant will surrender his passport and submit to electronic monitoring. Next case. The gavel came down like a gunshot. 50 million? Elena stared at Margot in disbelief. He'll pay that before lunch. Probably before breakfast, Margot muttered. Sure enough, 3 hours later, Victor Castelain walked out of the courthouse a free man. Ankle monitor hidden beneath expensive trousers, surrounded by security, smiling for the cameras like he'd just won an award instead of been charged with murder. Adrian was waiting outside Elena's gallery when she returned that afternoon, leaning against his car with the kind of tension that radiated off him in waves. Did you see? He asked without preamble. Everyone saw. It's all over the news. He's going to run, or worse. He's being monitored. You think that matters? He has resources, connections, people who owe him. An ankle monitor is an inconvenience, not a deterrent. Elena unlocked the gallery door, and they both went inside. The space felt safer than the street, more controlled. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we can't wait for the legal system to work, not when Castellane is out there, free to intimidate witnesses, destroy evidence, or disappear entirely. Adrian, we did this the right way. We got him arrested, got the charges filed. Now we have to trust the process. The process failed my father. The process is exactly what Castellane has spent decades corrupting. There it was again, that edge of obsession, of willingness to cross lines that shouldn't be crossed. Elena had hoped the arrest would satisfy something in Adrian, would prove that justice was possible. Instead, it seemed to have made him more desperate. So, what do you want to do? She asked carefully. Take matters into your own hands? Become exactly the kind of person Castellane is? I want to make sure he doesn't get away with it, whatever that takes. That's not an answer. That's a justification for doing something you know is wrong. Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his expression darkened. It's Sophia. Isabella's safe house was compromised. What? Someone tried to get in an hour ago. Security stopped them, but he was already heading for the door. We need to move her. Elena grabbed her coat and followed, questions piling up faster than answers. How had anyone found the safe house? Who had tried to breach it? And most importantly, how far would Castellane go to silence his own daughter? The safe house was in chaos when they arrived. Police were interviewing Sophia while Isabella sat on a couch, wrapped in a blanket despite the warm afternoon, looking like she'd aged 10 years in 2 days. What happened? Adrian asked Sophia quietly. 2 men, professional grade. They tried to disable the security system, but we'd upgraded it this morning. When that didn't work, they attempted to breach through the back entrance. Did you get them? 1. The other got away. Sophia nodded toward a police car where a man sat handcuffed in the back seat. He's not talking, but his equipment is expensive, military grade. This wasn't some hired thug. Elena moved to Isabella, sitting beside her on the couch. Are you okay? Am I okay? Isabella laughed, high and brittle. My father just tried to have me killed. So no, I'm not really okay. We don't know it was him. Please don't insult my intelligence. Of course it was him. Who else would want me dead right now? She had a point. Adrian joined them, crouching down so he was at eye level with Isabella. We're moving you somewhere more secure, somewhere he can't find. Where? He has connections everywhere. You said it yourself, he owns judges, police, prosecutors. What makes you think he doesn't own whoever you're planning to trust with my safety? Because the place I'm thinking of is completely off the grid. A property in the Northern Territories, hours from the nearest city. No digital footprint, no paper trail, nothing that can be traced. Elena stared at him. You're talking about the Blackthorn estate. I am. She'd heard about it but never seen it. The ancestral property Adrian's family had maintained for generations. Remote, harsh. The kind of place that made survival a daily choice rather than an assumption. That's where you went, Elena said slowly, understanding clicking into place. When you disappeared. That's where you were investigating from. For 6 months, yes. It's secure, defensible, and completely isolated. If we take Isabella there, Castellane won't be able to reach her. It's also in the middle of nowhere, Margot pointed out, having joined the conversation. What happens if something goes wrong? If someone gets hurt or sick? There's a doctor in the nearest town, medical supplies on site, and Sophia will be there for security. Isabella looked between them, her expression somewhere between terrified and resigned. When do we leave? Tonight, as soon as we can arrange transport. Tonight? Elena echoed. Adrian, that's necessary. The longer we wait, the more chances Castellane has to make another attempt. He wasn't wrong, but the speed of it all made Elena's head spin. Everything was moving too fast, spiraling beyond her control, or maybe beyond anyone's control. I'm coming too, she heard herself say. Adrian turned to her, surprise evident. Elena, don't. Don't tell me it's too dangerous or that I should stay here where it's safe. If we're doing this, protecting Isabella, seeing this through, then I'm part of it. Equal partners, remember? For a moment, she thought he might argue. Then his expression softened into something that looked like pride mixed with worry. Equal partners, he agreed. Pack for cold weather and at least 2 weeks. We leave in 4 hours. The Blackthorn estate turned out to be less estate and more fortress carved into a mountainside. They arrived after a 10-hour drive through increasingly hostile terrain, the last hour on roads that barely deserved the name. The main house was stone and timber, built to withstand winters that could kill the unprepared. Cheerful place, Margot observed as they pulled up. She'd insisted on coming too, claiming someone needed to keep Elena from making completely insane decisions. Elena hadn't argued. Inside, the house was surprisingly well-maintained. Someone, probably staff Adrian had hired for his previous stay, had kept it clean and stocked. Fireplaces in every room, generator for power, enough supplies to survive a siege. Which, Elena reflected grimly, might be exactly what they were preparing for. Isabella was given the largest bedroom, Sophia taking the room next to hers for security. Elena and Margot shared a suite on the second floor while Adrian took his father's old study, claiming he needed to work anyway. That first night, Elena couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, the darkness outside too complete. She found herself wandering downstairs around midnight, drawn by light coming from the study. Adrian was surrounded by documents, laptop glowing, a glass of whiskey forgotten at his elbow. He looked up when she entered. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. "Too much silence. I'm used to city noise." She moved closer, looking at the papers spread across the desk. "What is all this?" "Everything we have on Castellane, financial records, witness statements, timeline of crimes. I'm trying to find something we missed, some piece of evidence that makes the case airtight." "You think there's something?" "I think there has to be, because right now his lawyers are probably doing the same thing, looking for holes, weaknesses, ways to get the charges dismissed or reduced." Elena picked up one of the documents, a financial transfer record from 6 years ago. "How long did your father investigate before Castellane killed him?" 18 months, maybe longer. He kept journals, notes, but they were coded. It took me months just to decipher what he'd found. "Do you think he knew that he was in danger?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment. "I think he knew and did it anyway, because someone had to." "Sounds familiar." He smiled slightly. "Yeah, I guess it does." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, Elena helping sort documents, while Adrian built timelines and connections. It reminded her of late nights at the gallery, organizing exhibitions, making decisions about placement and flow. "Can I ask you something?" Adrian said eventually. "Depends on the question." "Why did you really come here? To this place? This situation? You could have stayed in the city, stayed safe." Elena considered several answers before settling on the truth. "Because a year ago, you made choices for me without asking. Decided I was too fragile to handle the reality of your life. And maybe I was, back then. But I'm not anymore. You were never fragile. I was just too scared to see how strong you actually were." Past tense? Past tense. Now I see exactly who you are, and it's terrifying and incredible in equal measure. She wanted to kiss him then, wanted to close the distance between them and pretend that everything was simple, that they were just two people who loved each other without all the complications of murder and conspiracy and danger. But nothing about them had ever been simple. "We should get some sleep," she said instead. "Tomorrow's going to be difficult." "They're all going to be difficult from here on out." He wasn't wrong. The next week settled into a strange routine. Mornings were spent coordinating with Catherine Morris, the prosecutor, who called daily with updates on the case. Castellane's lawyers were filing motions, challenging evidence, trying to get the recordings thrown out on technicality. "They're claiming illegal wiretapping," Catherine explained during one call, her voice tinny through the speaker. "Arguing that Isabella didn't have the right to record her father without his consent." "That's bullshit," Sophia said flatly. "She was protecting herself from a credible threat." "I agree, but we still have to argue it in court. The hearing is next week." "What happens if the judge sides with them?" Elena asked. "Then we lose our strongest piece of evidence. The case isn't dead, but it becomes significantly harder to prove." After the call ended, the room fell into tense silence. Isabella had been listening from the doorway, her face pale. "This is my fault," she said quietly. "If I hadn't recorded him." "If you hadn't recorded him, we wouldn't have nearly enough to charge him at all," Adrian cut her off. You did the right thing. Then why does the right thing keep making everything worse? It was a question none of them had a good answer for. The days grew colder, snow starting to fall in earnest. The isolation that had seemed like protection began to feel more like imprisonment. They were cut off, dependent on satellite internet that worked when it felt like it, surrounded by wilderness that could kill as efficiently as any assassin. Elena found Isabella one afternoon in the library, staring out at the snow-covered landscape. I used to love winter, Isabella said without turning. Snow days, skiing, hot chocolate. Now it just feels like the world is trying to bury us. We're going to get through this, Elena offered, knowing how hollow it sounded. Are we? Because from where I'm sitting, my father is out there, free, planning his next move. And we're hiding in the middle of nowhere, hoping his lawyers don't dismantle our entire case. Your testimony still matters. Even without the recordings, you can tell the court what you know. You mean I can stand in front of the whole world and betray my family? Become the daughter who destroyed her father? Isabella finally turned, and her eyes were wet with unshed tears. I know he's a monster. I know he deserves everything that's coming to him. But he's still my father, and some part of me still loves him, even though I hate myself for it. Elena moved to sit beside her, not touching, just present. Love doesn't turn off just because someone doesn't deserve it. That's what makes it so hard. How do you live with that? The contradiction? One day at a time, and you forgive yourself for being human. They sat together in silence, watching the snow fall, two women trying to navigate the impossible space between love and justice. That evening, the satellite internet died completely. Then the generator started acting up. Then, most concerning, the phone lines went down. Could be the storm, Sophia said, but her hand was already on her weapon. Or it could be something else. We need to assume worst case, Adrian decided. Everyone stays inside. Sophia, you take first watch. I'll relieve you in 4 hours. I can take a shift, Elena volunteered. Have you ever used a gun? No, but I can learn. Adrian pulled a handgun from somewhere. When had he started carrying? And showed her the basics. Safety on, safety off. How to aim. How to brace for recoil. It felt foreign and terrible in her hands, but also strangely empowering. I don't want you to have to use this, Adrian said quietly. But if someone gets past Sophia and me, I know. I'll do what I have to. That night, Elena barely slept. Every sound outside, wind, branches scraping the house, the settling of old timber, sounded like footsteps, like someone coming. Around 3 a.m., she gave up and went downstairs to make tea. She found Margot in the kitchen, doing the same thing. Can't sleep? Margot asked. Too many horror movies. I keep imagining masked men outside the windows. Not helping that we're in an isolated mansion with a storm raging and no communication with the outside world. Thanks for the reminder. They sat at the kitchen table, nursing their tea, both of them jumping at every creak and groan of the old house. Can I ask you something? Margot said eventually. Do you think we're going to make it through this? Really make it? I don't know. I want to say yes, but there are too many variables, too many things that could go wrong. Exactly. And if we don't? If Castellane wins? If he gets the charges dropped or disappears or worse? Elena thought about it. Then at least we tried. At least we didn't let him win without a fight. That's a pretty optimistic view for someone who looked ready to strangle his lawyers on that conference call. Despite everything, Elena smiled. I contain multitudes. The power came back around dawn, sputtering to life with a mechanical groan. Sophia immediately checked the security systems. All functioning, no signs of tampering. The phone lines remained dead, but the internet flickered back to unreliable life. An email was waiting from Catherine Morris, time-stamped from 4 hours earlier. Adrian read it aloud, his voice getting quieter with each line. The defense has filed a motion to dismiss all charges. They're claiming prosecutorial misconduct, illegal evidence gathering, and conspiracy to defame their client. The hearing is in 3 days. 3 days, Elena repeated. That's barely enough time to prepare a response. That's the point. They're trying to overwhelm us, make it impossible to mount an adequate defense. So what do? We go back, prepare Catherine's response, make sure every piece of evidence is bulletproof, every witness ready to testify. And Isabella? Sophia asked. Everyone turned to look at the young woman who'd appeared in the doorway sometime during the conversation. "I'm coming too," Isabella said firmly. "If this hearing is about whether our evidence is legitimate, then I need to be there, to testify if necessary." "Absolutely not," Adrian said immediately. "You'll be completely exposed, completely vulnerable." "I'm already exposed. I'm already vulnerable. Hiding up here doesn't change that." Isabella's voice was steady, resolved. "My father needs to see that I'm not afraid of him, that he doesn't control me anymore. He'll destroy you on the stand." "Let him try." Elena recognized that tone. It was the same one she'd used when she decided to confront Adrian at the gala, when she agreed to help investigate Castellane. The sound of someone who'd made a decision and wouldn't be talked out of it. "Then we all go," Elena said. "We present a united front." The drive back to the city took 12 hours through deteriorating weather conditions. They arrived at Adrian's penthouse apartment after midnight, all of them exhausted and running on adrenaline. The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. Catherine Morris worked with Isabella on testimony, going over every possible question the defense might ask, every trap they might set. Margot coordinated with forensic accountants to verify the financial evidence. Sophia arranged security that wouldn't be obvious, but would be thorough. And Elena helped Adrian prepare for the worst. Contingency plans if the charges were dismissed, if Castellane walked free, if everything they'd worked for fell apart. "We could leak the recordings to the press," Adrian suggested during one late-night strategy session. "Make sure the public knows what he is, even if the courts won't convict him." "That destroys any future prosecution," Catherine warned. "Taints the jury pool, gives him grounds for dismissal with prejudice." "So we just let him win?" "We fight in court with everything we have, and we trust that the judge will see through the defense's tactics." But trust had been in short supply lately. The hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. They arrived at the courthouse at 8:30, navigating a gauntlet of press and protesters. Castellane had supporters, people who believed his philanthropic work outweighed any alleged crimes, people who thought this was all a conspiracy. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Castellane sat at the defense table looking calm and confident, his lawyers arranged around him like chess pieces. The judge entered, the same older man from the bail hearing, and the room fell silent. "We're here on a motion to dismiss charges against Victor Castellane," he began. "Defense, you may present your arguments." The lead defense attorney stood, smooth and practiced. "Your Honor, this case is built on illegally obtained evidence and the coerced testimony of a young woman who was manipulated by people with a vendetta against her father. The recordings in question were made without proper authorization or oversight. The financial records were accessed through questionable means, and the entire investigation was conducted not by proper authorities, but by a grieving son looking for revenge." Catherine stood. "Your Honor, the recordings were made by Isabella Castellane herself, acting to protect her own safety. She had every right to document threats against her life. The financial records are legitimate business documents that show a pattern of criminal activity, and the investigation was conducted in parallel with proper authorities who had been unable to move forward due to intimidation and corruption." "Alleged corruption," the defense attorney interjected. "My client has never been convicted of intimidating anyone." "Because the witnesses keep dying or disappearing," Catherine shot back. The judge held up a hand. "I'll hear from the witness. Isabella Castellane, please take the stand." Elena watched Isabella walk to the witness stand, her posture straight, her hands steady. She looked young and fragile under the courtroom lights, but her voice when she spoke was strong. "Please state your name for the record." "Isabella Marie Castellane." "And you're the daughter of the defendant?" "I am." "Can you tell the court why you recorded your father without his knowledge?" Isabella took a breath. "Because I was afraid he was going to kill me, like he killed Marcus Blackthorne, like he's killed others who threatened his operations." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Castellane's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Anger, or maybe fear. "That's a serious accusation," the judge said. "Do you have evidence?" "I have his own words, Your Honor, admitting to murder, to money laundering, to running a criminal enterprise. I have years of watching him destroy people who got in his way. I have the knowledge that my own father values his power more than my life." "Your Honor, this is clearly rehearsed testimony." the defense attorney began. I'll allow it. Continue, Ms. Castellane. Isabella looked directly at her father then, and Elena saw something break and reform in her expression. I loved you. I wanted so badly to believe you were the man you pretended to be. But you're not. You're a murderer and a criminal, and I won't protect you anymore. Not even if it costs me everything. The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order, his gavel slamming down repeatedly. Castellane's lawyers were on their feet, objecting, demanding the testimony be stricken. And through it all, Castellane stared at his daughter with an expression Elena couldn't quite read. Betrayal, certainly, but also something that might have been respect. The judge finally restored order. I'm going to review all the evidence and testimony. I'll issue my ruling in 1 week. Court is adjourned. They filed out of the courtroom into a waiting mob of press. Questions being shouted, cameras flashing, the chaos of a story that had captured public attention. Elena stayed close to Isabella, who looked shell-shocked despite her strong testimony. You did good, Elena said quietly. You told the truth. Then why do I feel like I just made the biggest mistake of my life? They made it to the car, Sophia driving, Adrian in front, Elena and Isabella in back with Margot. They were pulling away from the courthouse when Sophia's phone rang. Yeah? She listened, her expression darkening. When? How many? A pause. We're on our way. What happened? Adrian demanded. That was my contact in the police department. Castellane's ankle monitor just went offline, and he's gone. The words hung in the air for a moment before their full meaning sank in. Gone as in he's running, Margot said slowly. Gone as in he disabled the monitor, evaded his security detail, and disappeared approximately 30 minutes ago. Sophia was already changing routes, heading toward what Elena assumed was a safe location. Which means he knows he's about to lose in court, and he's coming for anyone who can testify against him. Elena's blood went cold. Isabella is the primary target, yes, followed by everyone else who helped build the case. Adrian turned in his seat to look at them. We need to split up, make it harder for him to find us all at once. Or we stay together, Elena countered. Safety in numbers. There's no safety anymore, Isabella said quietly. Not for me. Not for any of us. Sophia's phone rang again. She answered, listened, and her face went ashen. There's been an explosion at Catherine Morris's office. She's alive but hospitalized, and they found a hit list in Castellani's house. Who's on it? Adrian asked, though Elena suspected they all knew the answer. Everyone. Isabella, me, you, Elena, Margot, Catherine, even the judge. Sophia's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. He's not running. He's eliminating loose ends. And we're all on his list. The safe house Sophia chose was a warehouse in the industrial district, all concrete and steel, the kind of place that looked abandoned but had security measures that would make a military installation jealous. They piled out of the car and into the building, Sophia checking locks and activating systems while the rest of them tried to process what had just happened. He's really going to kill us, Margot said, her usual composure cracking. All of us. Jesus Christ, what have we gotten into? A war, Adrian said flatly. One we're currently losing. Then we change the rules, Elena heard herself say. Everyone turned to look at her. What? You're all acting like we're just going to hide here and wait for Castellane to pick us off one by one. That's not a plan. That's surrender. What exactly are you suggesting? Sophia asked, her tone careful. Elena's mind was racing, pieces clicking together faster than she could articulate them. Castellane went into hiding because he knows he's about to lose in court, but he can't stay hidden forever. He needs access to his money, his resources, his network, which means he has to surface eventually. And when he does, he'll have every advantage, Adrian pointed out. Money, connections, people willing to kill for him. Unless we take those advantages away. Elena turned to Margot. You've been tracking his financial network. Can you freeze his assets? Freeze them? Elena, that would require court orders, federal involvement. Can you do it without all that? Hack into his accounts, transfer the money somewhere he can't access it? Margot stared at her. That's incredibly illegal. So is murder. So is everything Castellane has done for the past 20 years. The question is whether we're willing to fight him on his level or keep playing by rules he's already broken. Silence filled the warehouse. Elena could see the conflict on their faces, the desire to do the right thing warring with the reality that the right thing might get them all killed. I can do it, Margot finally said. It'll take time and I'll need equipment, but I can lock him out of his own empire. Good. Sophia, you said you have contacts in law enforcement, people who aren't on Castellane's payroll. A few. Federal agents mostly, people who've been trying to build a case against him for years. Call them. Tell them Castellane is on the run, armed, dangerous, and actively trying to eliminate witnesses. Make this so public that he can't move without someone seeing him. Sophia nodded slowly. That could work. If we can turn this into a manhunt, force him to keep hiding instead of attacking. Exactly. We make him react to us instead of the other way around. Adrian was watching Elena with something like awe. When did you become a strategist? When the alternative was dying passively. She turned to Isabella, who'd been silent through the whole exchange. And you're going to help us. Me? How? You know your father better than anyone. His habits, his safe houses, the people he trusts. Where would he go? Who would he turn to? Isabella thought for a moment. He has a property upstate, a hunting lodge he bought through a shell company years ago. No one knows about it except family. Would he feel safe there? Safe enough to regroup. It's isolated, defensible. He used to take me there when I was young, taught me to shoot, to survive. Said a Castellani should always be prepared for war. The irony of that statement hung heavy in the air. Then that's where we hit him, Elena said. Not with guns or violence, but with the truth. We expose him so completely, so publicly, that he has nowhere left to hide. Margot set up her equipment in a corner of the warehouse. 3 laptops, external hard drives, cables running in every direction like technological tentacles. She worked with fierce concentration, her fingers flying across keyboards, screens filling with code and financial data. This is insane, she muttered periodically. Completely insane. If we get caught, we won't get caught, Elena said with more confidence than she felt. Because we're going to make sure every action we take leads back to exposing Castellane's crimes. We're not stealing his money. We're freezing assets connected to illegal operations. That's a very fine distinction. But it's a distinction, and it matters. Sophia was on the phone with her federal contacts, painting a picture of a desperate fugitive who'd already attempted one murder and was planning more. Elena could hear the shift in tone as the gravity of the situation sank in. This wasn't just another white-collar criminal. This was an active threat. Adrian pulled Elena aside while the others worked. Are you sure about this? Once we start down this path, there's no going back. I stopped being sure about anything the moment you walked back into my life, Elena said. But I'm certain about this. If we don't act, if we just hide and wait, Castellane wins. And I'm not giving him that satisfaction. You've changed so much from the woman I knew. The woman you knew didn't exist. This is who I always was underneath. You just never gave me a chance to show you. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I see you now, all of you, and you're magnificent. Save the compliments for when we're not on a hit list. But she didn't pull away from his touch. The first domino fell 6 hours later. Margot let out a whoop of triumph that made everyone jump. Got it! Access to his main offshore accounts. Transferring everything to a frozen escrow account that requires federal court authorization to access. How much? Sophia asked. $240 million, give or take. Silence. That's... Adrian shook his head. That's more than I thought he had liquid. It's probably not even half of his total worth, Margot said, still typing. But it's what he can access immediately, or could access, past tense now. He's gonna know, Isabella said quietly. He monitors those accounts constantly. He'll know within minutes that something's wrong. Good, Elena said. Let him panic. Let him make mistakes. The second domino fell an hour after that. Sophia's contacts came through. The FBI was officially classifying Castellane as a fugitive and potential terrorist threat. His photo was going out to every law enforcement agency in the country, his known associates being rounded up for questioning. They're treating this seriously, Sophia reported. Full task force, resources allocated. Your prosecutor friend Catherine is recovering and giving testimony from her hospital bed about the bombing. So we've got him trapped, Margot said. No money, no freedom of movement, law enforcement actively hunting him. We've got him cornered, Adrian corrected, which makes him more dangerous, not less. A cornered animal fights hardest. As if on cue, Sophia's phone rang. She answered, listened, and her expression went dark. There's been an incident. One of the federal agents working the case. He was found dead in his car. Single gunshot, professional execution. The brief moment of triumph evaporated. Castellane's sending a message, Elena said, that he can still reach us, still hurt people. Then we send a message back, Isabella said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. I want to do a press conference. Tell the world everything. What he is, what he's done, what he's still trying to do. Absolutely not, Adrian said immediately. You'd be making yourself a target. I'm already a target. We all are. But if I go public, if I tell my story before he can spin it, then killing me becomes pointless. It would just confirm everything I've said. Or it would silence the primary witness against him, Sophia pointed out. Not if the story is already out there. Not if millions of people have heard it. Isabella's hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. He taught me that power comes from controlling the narrative. So let's take that power away from him. Elena saw the logic even as she hated the risk. She's right. If Isabella goes public now, while Castelaine is on the run and desperate, it changes the entire dynamic. He becomes the villain everyone's seen, not just the man we're accusing. It's too dangerous, Adrian insisted. Everything is too dangerous. Isabella's composure finally cracked. Don't you get it? There is no safe option here. My father won't stop until we're all dead or he's in prison. So we can hide and wait to die, or we can fight back with the only weapon we have, the truth. The silence that followed was heavy with calculation and fear. I'll arrange it, Sophia finally said. Major networks, maximum visibility. Tomorrow morning, if we can coordinate it. Tomorrow? Margot looked alarmed. That's not enough time to prepare. We don't need preparation. We just need Isabella telling her story. Elena moved to stand beside the younger woman. And she won't be alone. I'll be there too. Elena, no, Adrian started. Yes. If Isabella is brave enough to stand up to her father publicly, then I'm brave enough to stand beside her. We both are. She looked at Adrian meaningfully. All of us are. Understanding dawned on his face. You want us to present a united front. Show Castelaine that he hasn't just failed to silence Isabella, he's created an army against him. Exactly. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, the gesture so familiar it made Elena's chest ache. Okay, we do this together. Tomorrow morning, we end Victor Castellani's ability to hide in the shadows. The rest of the night was spent preparing. Sophia coordinated with networks, all of whom were eager to land the exclusive interview with Victor Castellane's daughter. They chose the largest morning show, the one with the widest reach. Margot helped Isabella organize her thoughts, creating a timeline of her father's crimes that was devastating in its completeness. Adrian worked with federal prosecutors to ensure that anything Isabella said publicly wouldn't compromise the criminal case. And Elena just stayed close to Isabella, offering silent support as the young woman prepared to destroy her father's legacy on national television. Around 3 a.m., when the others had finally crashed into exhausted sleep, Elena found Isabella sitting alone in a corner of the warehouse, staring at her phone. Can't sleep? Elena asked quietly. Last message from my mother, Isabella said, showing Elena the screen. She says I'm a traitor, that I've destroyed our family, that she'll never forgive me. I'm sorry. Don't be. She made her choice. She chose to stay blind, to keep pretending everything was fine while my father built an empire on blood and lies. Isabella wiped her eyes roughly. I wish there was a world where I could have both, where I could do the right thing and keep my family. There isn't, Elena said gently. I learned that the hard way. Sometimes doing the right thing costs you everything you thought you wanted, but you wake up the next day and realize you can live with the cost because at least you can live with yourself. Does it get easier? I don't know yet. Ask me in a year. That got a small, broken laugh. The morning arrived too fast and too slow simultaneously. They drove to the television studio in 2 cars, Sophia running interference with security while the rest of them were hustled into a green room. A producer briefed them on timing, on questions they could expect, on the format of the interview. Isabella looked pale, but determined. She dressed simply, jeans, a white blouse, minimal makeup. She looked young and honest, exactly the image they needed. 5 minutes, the producer called. Adrian pulled Elena aside. If anything happens, if this goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, I need you to know that this, us together, has meant everything to me. That you've been braver and stronger than I ever deserved. Stop talking like we're about to die. We're about to win. I love you, he said quietly. I never stopped. Not for a single moment. Elena kissed him then, quick and fierce. Tell me again when this is over. When we're safe and Castellane is behind bars and we have time to figure out what comes next. Deal. They were led onto the set, a bright, sterile space designed to make everything look professional and trustworthy. The host was a woman in her 50s, known for hard-hitting interviews that got to the truth. Isabella sat in the primary chair, Elena and Adrian flanking her, Sophia and Margot in the audience. The cameras started rolling. We're here with Isabella Castellane, the host began, daughter of fugitive businessman Victor Castellane, who has agreed to speak publicly for the first time about her father's alleged crimes. Isabella, thank you for being here. Thank you for having me. Let's start with the obvious question. Your father is currently wanted by federal authorities for murder, conspiracy, money laundering, and racketeering. These are serious charges. Do you believe they're true? Isabella took a breath, and Elena could see her gathering courage. I don't just believe they're true. I know they are. I've witnessed them, and I'm here to make sure the world knows exactly who Victor Castellane really is. And then she began to talk. She talked about growing up in a house where money solved every problem and violence was always an option, about overhearing conversations that made her blood run cold, about the moment she realized her father was a monster wearing a philanthropist's mask. She talked about the recording she'd made, about the fear that drove her to document his confession, about learning that Marcus Blackthorne hadn't committed suicide. He'd been murdered for threatening to expose the truth. My father killed a good man, Isabella said, her voice breaking slightly. And then he used that man's company as a front for his criminal operations. He profited from murder, and when his own daughter threatened to expose him, he tried to have me killed too. The host leaned forward. That's a serious accusation. Do you have proof? I have his own words on tape admitting to murder. I have financial records showing illegal transactions spanning 20 years. I have the testimony of people he's hurt, intimidated, destroyed. Isabella looked directly at the camera. And I have the courage to say this publicly, knowing that it might cost me my life. Because some things are more important than survival. The interview went on for 30 minutes. Isabella laying out the evidence piece by piece, answering questions with devastating honesty. Adrian spoke about his father's investigation, about the year he'd spent building a case. Elena talked about helping to expose the conspiracy, about refusing to stay silent in the face of evil. By the time it was over, there wasn't a person watching who could doubt the truth of what they were saying. They left the studio to chaos. The story was already going viral. #Castellane Exposed was trending, news outlets picking up the interview, social media exploding with reactions. The court of public opinion had rendered its verdict, and it was damning. Holy hell, Margot said, scrolling through her phone. This is everywhere. CNN, BBC, every major outlet. Isabella, you just destroyed your father's entire reputation in half an hour. Good, Isabella said quietly. He destroyed enough lives. Time someone returned the favor. Sophia's phone rang. She answered, listened, and her expression shifted from grim to something that might have been satisfaction. They found him. The FBI has Castellane surrounded at the hunting lodge. The news hit like a physical blow. After everything, the fear, the running, the desperate strategizing, it was almost over. Are they moving in? Adrian asked. Negotiating surrender. He's barricaded inside, claims he has hostages. Does he? They don't think so. Security cameras show the property empty, except for him, but they're being cautious. They returned to the warehouse and watched the siege unfold on live television. Every major network had helicopters overhead, cameras trained on the remote hunting lodge where Victor Castellane had made his last stand. Elena watched beside Adrian, their hands clasped tightly together. After everything they'd been through, it seemed almost anticlimactic to have it end this way. With Castellane trapped and cornered, his crimes exposed, his empire frozen, his reputation destroyed. "Come out with your hands up," the FBI negotiator's voice boomed over a loudspeaker. "This doesn't have to end badly." The door to the lodge opened, and Victor Castellane walked out. He looked diminished somehow, still tall, still commanding, but the weight of his collapsed world visible in his posture. His hands were raised, his expression unreadable. Officers swarmed him immediately, forcing him to his knees, securing his hands behind his back. The perp walk was broadcast live to millions of viewers the moment a Titan fell. "We did it," Margot whispered. "We actually did it." "Isabella did it," Elena corrected, looking at the young woman who was watching her father's arrest, with tears streaming down her face. She was brave enough to stand up when it mattered most. The arraignment happened that afternoon, expedited due to the public nature of the case and Castellane's fugitive status. They all attended, sitting in the gallery, watching as the man who terrorized them was formally charged with 14 counts of murder, conspiracy, racketeering, money laundering, and attempted murder of federal witnesses. The judge, a different one this time, a younger woman with steel in her spine, denied bail entirely. "The defendant has demonstrated a clear willingness to flee, to intimidate witnesses, and to use violence to obstruct justice," she said firmly. "He will remain in federal custody until trial." The gavel came down with a finality that made Elena's shoulders sag with relief. Outside the courthouse, they were mobbed by press again. But this time, the questions weren't accusatory. They were celebratory. People wanted to know how they'd brought down Castellane, what it felt like to expose such massive corruption, what came next. Isabella handled it with surprising grace. What comes next is justice, a trial where all the evidence is presented, where every crime is examined, where the truth is finally told completely. My father spent decades hiding behind money and power. Now he'll face the consequences like anyone else. "Do you have any message for him?" a reporter called out. Isabella paused, considering. "I loved you. I wanted so badly for you to be better than you were. But you weren't, and I won't spend my life protecting your lies anymore." The clip would play on every news channel for days. They retreated to Adrian's penthouse that evening, all of them too exhausted for celebration, but too wired to sleep. Margot ordered takeout, too much food from too many restaurants, the kind of excess that came from surviving something terrible. Catherine called, Sophia reported, her phone constantly buzzing with updates. "She's out of the hospital and already planning the prosecution. Says she's never had a case this solid." "When's the trial?" Adrian asked. 6 months, maybe 8. Federal cases take time. And Castellane's network? His associates? Rolling over on each other like dominoes. Everyone wants to make a deal, claim they didn't know what he was doing. Sophia smiled grimly. Turns out loyalty only extends as far as plausible deniability. Elena found herself on the balcony eventually, looking out at the city lights and trying to process everything that had happened. A month ago, she'd been running her gallery, living her carefully reconstructed life, trying to forget about Adrian Blackthorne. Now she was here, having helped bring down a criminal empire, having stood beside a young woman brave enough to betray her father for justice, having fallen back in love with a man she'd sworn to forget. "Here you are," Adrian said, joining her on the balcony. "I've been looking for you. Just needed some air, some quiet." "It's over," he said softly. "Really over. Castellane is in jail, the case is solid, and we're all safe." "Are we?" "Because I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something else to go wrong." "Nothing's going to go wrong. We won." Elena turned to face him. "Did we? Or did we just survive?" "Both. Maybe surviving is the same as winning sometimes." She thought about that. About the past year of survival without him, the past month of surviving with him. about Isabella surviving her father's betrayal, about all of them surviving Castellane's attempts to silence them. "I love you too," she said suddenly. "I know you told me to wait until we were safe, but we're safe now. And I love you still. Again. Whatever." Adrian pulled her close, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Elena let herself believe that maybe everything would actually be okay. Inside, she could hear the others laughing about something, Margot's voice rising above the rest, telling some story that was probably at Elena's expense. Isabella's quieter laughter joining in, Sophia's dry commentary. They were a strange family, forged in crisis and bound by shared trauma, but they were a family nonetheless. "What happens now?" Elena asked against Adrian's chest. "After the trial, after Castelaine is convicted, what do we do with normal lives?" "I don't know, but I think we figure it out together." "Together," Elena repeated. I like the sound of that. The city stretched out below them, millions of lights, millions of lives, millions of stories unfolding in the darkness. Somewhere in that vastness, Victor Castelaine sat in a cell, his empire destroyed, his legacy in ruins. And up here, the people who'd brought him down were beginning to imagine what came next. It wasn't perfect. They all carried scars from what they'd been through, wounds that might never fully heal. But they'd survived. They'd won. And that was more than enough. For now. For now turned out to be 6 weeks. 6 weeks of relative peace where Elena returned to her gallery, where Adrian worked to repair the damage Castelaine had done to Blackthorn Industries, where Isabella started therapy and began the slow process of rebuilding an identity separate from her father's shadow. 6 weeks where they all pretended that normal life was possible, that the worst was behind them. Then Catherine Morris called. "We have a problem," she said without preamble when Elena answered. Castelaine's legal team has filed a motion to suppress all evidence obtained through Isabella's recordings, and they found a judge sympathetic to their arguments. Elena's stomach dropped. "When's the hearing?" "Tomorrow. I need you all there. If this goes sideways, if the judge rules in Castelaine's favor, we lose the foundation of our entire case." They gathered at Adrian's penthouse that evening, the whole team, plus Catherine, who looked exhausted and furious in equal measure. "How is this even possible?" Margot demanded. "The recordings are legitimate. Isabella was protecting herself. Castelaine's lawyers are arguing that she was acting as an agent of law enforcement without proper authorization, that we used her to circumvent warrant requirements and due process." Catherine spread documents across the table. "It's a reach, but the judge hearing the motion, Judge Harrington, has a history of ruling in favor of defendants on technicalities." "Harrington?" Sophia repeated slowly. "Daniel Harrington? You know him?" "I know of him. Old money, connected to the same social circles as Castelaine. There were rumors years ago that he was in Castelaine's pocket, but nothing was ever proven." "Perfect," Adrian said bitterly. "So we're going before a corrupt judge to defend evidence against a motion filed by a murderer's lawyers. This is exactly the kind of system my father died trying to fight. But then we fight it the same way he would have," Elena said firmly. "With the truth. With evidence that can't be denied. We don't let them make this about technicalities and legal loopholes. We make it about justice." Isabella, who'd been quiet through the whole exchange, finally spoke. "I want to testify. At the hearing tomorrow. I want to tell the judge exactly why I made those recordings." "Isabella, that's not how suppression hearings work," Catherine started. "The judge is only considering legal questions, not—" "Then make it part of the legal question, whether I had the right to protect myself, whether a daughter has the legal authority to document threats against her own life." Isabella's voice was steady despite the fear Elena could see in her eyes. "They're trying to silence me again. I won't let them." Catherine looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay. I'll petition the court to allow victim impact testimony. It's unconventional, but given the circumstances," she started making notes, "we'll frame it as establishing the context for why the recordings were made. Show that this wasn't some conspiracy to entrap Castelaine, but a young woman desperate to survive." The hearing the next morning had a different energy than the arraignment. Smaller courtroom, fewer spectators, but the tension was suffocating. Castellane sat at the defense table looking smug, his lawyers arranged around him with the confidence of people who believed they were about to win. Judge Harrington entered, a man in his late 60s with silver hair and the kind of bearing that suggested he'd never been told no in his life. Elena disliked him immediately. "We're here on a motion to suppress evidence," Harrington began, his tone suggesting he'd already made up his mind. "Defense, present your arguments." The lead defense attorney stood, smooth and practiced as always. "Your Honor, the prosecution's case rests almost entirely on recordings made by Isabella Castellane without her father's knowledge or consent. These recordings were then turned over to law enforcement and used as the basis for charges against my client. We contend that this constitutes an illegal wiretap in violation of my client's Fourth Amendment rights." Catherine stood. "Your Honor, Isabella Castellane was not acting as an agent of law enforcement. She was a private citizen documenting threats against her life. The recordings were made in her own defense and only later provided to authorities. This is well within legal precedent for self-preservation." "The recordings were made with the explicit purpose of building a criminal case," the defense attorney countered. "Ms. Castellane was working in concert with Adrian Blackthorne, who had a vendetta against my client. This was a coordinated effort to circumvent proper investigative procedures." "That's absurd," Catherine said sharply. "Isabella Castellane acted independently to protect herself from a man who had already murdered multiple people and was planning to kill her." "Allegedly murdered," the defense attorney corrected, a fact that is only proven by the very recordings we're seeking to suppress. The arguments went back and forth for an hour, each side presenting precedents and legal theories. Elena watched Judge Harrington's face, trying to read which way he was leaning. His expression gave nothing away. Finally, Catherine made her petition. "Your Honor, I'd like to call Isabella Castellane to provide context for why these recordings were made." "This is highly irregular," the defense attorney objected. "This is a legal hearing, not a trial." "And yet the legal question at hand is whether Ms. Castellane had justification for her actions," Catherine argued. "The court should hear directly from her about the circumstances that led to those recordings." Judge Harrington was quiet for a long moment. "I'll allow it, but keep it brief, Ms. Morris. This isn't a forum for emotional appeals." Isabella took the stand with the same quiet determination she'd shown during the television interview. She looked young and vulnerable under the courtroom lights, but her voice when she spoke was clear. "Please state your name for the record." "Isabella Marie Castellane." "Ms. Castellane, can you tell the court why you recorded your father without his knowledge?" Isabella took a breath. "Because I was afraid he was going to kill me. I'd been documenting irregularities in his foundation's finances, asking questions about transactions that didn't make sense. And one night, I overheard him talking about handling a liability. 2 days later, a man who'd been asking similar questions died in a car accident. What did you think that meant?" "I thought I was next. I thought my father, the man who raised me, who I'd loved my entire life, was going to have me murdered to protect his secrets." "So you made the recordings." "I made them because I wanted proof. Because if something happened to me, I wanted the world to know why. I wanted justice, even if I wasn't alive to see it." The courtroom was completely silent. Even the defense attorneys looked uncomfortable. "Did anyone tell you to make these recordings?" Catherine asked. "No, I made that decision entirely on my own." "Did you coordinate with law enforcement?" "Not until after I'd already recorded my father admitting to murder, after I had proof that everything I'd feared was true." "Thank you, Ms. Castellane." The defense attorney stood for cross-examination, his expression calculated. "Ms. Castellane, isn't it true that you met with Elena Whitford and Adrian Blackthorne before making these recordings?" "I met with them, yes." "And they encouraged you to gather evidence against your father?" "They offered me a choice, to help expose the truth or to walk away. I chose to help." "So you were working with them, building a case together?" "I was trying to stay alive. They were trying to get justice for Adrian's father. Those things aligned, but I didn't make the recordings because they asked me to. I made them because I was terrified." "Convenient that your terror produced exactly the evidence needed to charge my client." "Convenient." Isabella's composure cracked slightly. "There's nothing convenient about learning your father is a murderer. about being so afraid of the man who raised you that you have to document his crimes just to survive. I would have given anything for those recordings to prove me wrong, but they didn't. They proved exactly what I'd feared. The defense attorney opened his mouth, then closed it again. There was no good response to that kind of raw honesty. No further questions, he finally said. Judge Harrington called for a brief recess to consider the arguments. They filed out into the hallway, tension coiled tight in everyone's shoulders. That was good, Catherine said to Isabella quietly. Really good. You showed the human element, made it impossible for Harrington to ignore why you did what you did. Will it be enough? I don't know, but it's the best chance we have. The recess lasted 30 minutes that felt like 30 hours. When they filed back in, Judge Harrington's expression was unreadable. I've considered both arguments, he began. The defense raises valid concerns about the methods used to obtain evidence in this case. However, the context matters. Isabella Castellane was not acting as a law enforcement agent. She was a private citizen in fear for her life, documenting threats from her own father. While the recordings may ultimately be used in a criminal prosecution, that was not their primary purpose. Elena felt hope rising in her chest. Furthermore, Harrington continued, the defendant's own words on those recordings constitute voluntary statements. He was not coerced, was not under arrest, was in his own home speaking freely. The fact that his daughter recorded those statements without his knowledge does not make them inadmissible. Your Honor, the defense attorney started. I'm not finished. The motion to suppress is denied. The recordings will be admitted as evidence at trial. However, I am ordering the prosecution to turn over all materials related to how these recordings were obtained, including any communications between Isabella Castellane and the investigative team. The defense has a right to examine the full context. The gavel came down. It wasn't a complete victory. The requirement to turn over communications could reveal strategy, could give Castellane's lawyers ammunition, but the recordings stood. The case survived. Outside the courthouse, they were mobbed by press again. But this time, Catherine took the lead. Today's ruling confirms what we've known all along, that Isabella Castellane acted courageously to protect herself and to ensure that the truth about her father's crimes would be known. The recordings stand as evidence, and we look forward to presenting the full case at trial. When will the trial begin? A reporter called out. We're pushing for the earliest possible date. Justice delayed is justice denied, and Victor Castellane has avoided justice for far too long. The trial date was set for 3 months out. 3 months of preparation, of witness interviews, of building an unassailable case. Elena threw herself into helping however she could, organizing documents, coordinating with witnesses, providing support to Isabella, who was struggling under the weight of what was coming. I'm going to have to testify against him in open court, Isabella said one evening, sitting in Elena's gallery after hours. Look him in the eye and detail every crime, every lie, every person he hurt. You don't have to do this, Elena reminded her gently. You could take a deal, go into witness protection, disappear. And spend the rest of my life running, hiding? No. Isabella shook her head. I started this. I'm going to finish it. You're braver than you give yourself credit for. I'm terrified. There's a difference. No, there's not. Bravery is being terrified and doing it anyway. The weeks leading up to trial were a strange mix of mundane and momentous. Elena and Adrian found themselves falling into a rhythm. Dinners together, late nights reviewing evidence, quiet mornings where they pretended that normal life was possible. They didn't talk about the future beyond the trial. It felt like tempting fate. Margot had returned to her regular work but stayed close, providing both financial analysis and moral support. Sophia prepared to testify about the investigation, about Castellane's attempts to eliminate witnesses, and Isabella prepared to face her father. The trial began on a cold Monday morning in late autumn. The courthouse was packed, every seat in the gallery filled, overflow crowds watching on screens in adjacent rooms, media presence that turned the whole proceeding into a spectacle. The jury had been selected carefully, 12 people who'd somehow avoided the saturation coverage of Castellane's arrest and exposure. 12 people who would hear the evidence with supposedly fresh ears. Catherine's opening statement was devastating in its simplicity. Victor Castellane is a murderer. He killed Marcus Blackthorne because Blackthorne discovered his crimes. He built a criminal empire on blood and lies. And when his own daughter threatened to expose him, he tried to have her killed too. Over the next weeks, you will hear testimony that proves beyond any doubt that Victor Castellane is not the philanthropist he pretends to be. He is a criminal who deserves to spend the rest of his life in prison. The defense's opening was predictable, attacking the credibility of witnesses, suggesting that this was all a conspiracy by people with grudges against a successful man, painting Castellane as a victim of circumstance and vendetta. The first week of testimony was financial experts walking the jury through the money trails. Margot spent 2 days on the stand, explaining with devastating clarity how Castellane had laundered hundreds of millions of dollars through legitimate businesses, how he'd used the Prometheus Foundation as a front for arms deals and illegal transactions. The defense tried to paint her as biased, as someone with a personal stake in destroying Castellane. Margot handled it with icy precision. "My stake is in the truth," she said clearly. "These numbers don't lie. This money was moved illegally, used illegally, and profited Victor Castellane while funding criminal operations." The second week brought testimony from former associates who'd turned on Castellane to save themselves. Men who'd participated in the money laundering, who'd facilitated the arms deals, who'd witnessed murders and been too scared to speak up. Their testimony was damning, but the defense worked to undermine each one, pointing out their own crimes, suggesting they were lying to get lighter sentences. And then came week 3. Isabella's turn. Elena sat in the gallery with Adrian, watching as Isabella took the stand. She'd dressed simply again, a navy suit that made her look professional and young simultaneously. Her hands were shaking as she was sworn in, but her voice was steady. Catherine led her through the testimony gently. Isabella's childhood, the slow realization that her father was not who he seemed, the overheard conversations, and unexplained deaths. The moment she decided to make the recordings, the fear that drove her. And then they played the recordings. Castellane's voice filled the courtroom, casual and cold, admitting to murder, discussing illegal operations, threatening anyone who might expose him. The jury was riveted, several of them looking horrified. When Isabella identified her father's voice, when she confirmed the context of each recording, there were tears streaming down her face. "He said I was becoming a liability," she testified, her voice breaking. "The man who taught me to ride a bike, who came to every school play, who told me he loved me. He looked at me as a problem that needed to be handled, and I knew what that meant. I knew he'd killed people who were problems before." The defense attorney's cross-examination was brutal. He attacked her credibility, suggested she'd been manipulated by Adrian and Elena, implied that she was lying to get revenge for some perceived slight. "Isn't it true that your father cut your allowance the month before you made these recordings?" he asked. "My father tried to have me killed," Isabella said flatly. "This has nothing to do with money. You were angry at him, angry enough to fabricate evidence." "I didn't fabricate anything. Those are his own words admitting to his own crimes. No amount of twisting will change that. You're a troubled young woman who... I'm a daughter who survived her father's attempt to murder her. That's the only thing that matters here." The cross-examination went on for hours, the defense attorney trying every angle to break Isabella's testimony. But she held firm, answering each question with quiet strength. When she finally stepped down, Elena could see the exhaustion in every line of her body, but also relief. The worst was over. The truth was told. The final week of testimony brought Adrian to the stand. He walked the jury through his father's investigation, through the year he'd spent building on Marcus's work, through the evidence they'd gathered. He was calm and factual, letting the evidence speak for itself. The defense tried to paint him as obsessed, as someone so desperate for revenge that he'd manufactured a case against an innocent man. "My father was murdered," Adrian said simply. "I spent 5 years believing he'd given up, that he'd chosen to leave us. Learning the truth, that he was killed for trying to do the right thing, didn't make me obsessed. It made me determined. Determined that his death wouldn't be for nothing." When the prosecution rested its case, Catherine had presented overwhelming evidence, financial records, witness testimony, recordings, documentation of crimes spanning 2 decades. The defense's case was weak by comparison. Character witnesses who spoke of Castellane's philanthropy, expert witnesses who tried to poke holes in the financial analysis, suggestions that this was all circumstantial. But Castellane didn't take the stand. His lawyers advised against it, knowing that Catherine would eviscerate him on cross-examination. Closing arguments came on a Friday afternoon. Catherine was passionate and precise, tying every piece of evidence together into an unassailable narrative of guilt. Victor Castellane is not a philanthropist, she concluded. He is a murderer, a criminal, a man who built an empire on the suffering of others. The evidence is overwhelming. The truth is undeniable. Find him guilty on all counts, and ensure that he can never hurt anyone again. The defense's closing was a last-ditch attempt to create reasonable doubt. But the attorney's heart didn't seem to be in it. He knew what the evidence showed, knew what the jury had heard. The jury deliberated for 3 days. 3 days where Elena couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, could barely function. They'd done everything right, presented every piece of evidence, but juries were unpredictable. One holdout, one person who believed the defense's conspiracy theories, and everything could fall apart. On the 3rd day, word came. The jury had reached a verdict. The courtroom was even more packed than before. Everyone who'd followed the trial, everyone who'd been touched by Castellane's crimes, everyone who needed to see justice served. Elena sat between Adrian and Isabella, all three of them holding hands tightly. The jury filed in. Elena tried to read their faces, looking for some sign of which way they'd voted, but they were carefully neutral, giving nothing away. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" the judge asked. "We have, Your Honor. On the charge of first-degree murder in the death of Marcus Blackthorne, how do you find the defendant?" "Guilty." The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order, but Elena barely heard it over the rushing in her ears. Guilty. They'd said guilty. "On the charges of conspiracy to commit murder, how do you find?" "Guilty." "On the charges of money laundering?" "Guilty." On and on, count after count. Guilty, guilty, guilty. 14 guilty verdicts, one for each charge Catherine had brought. By the time the jury foreman finished reading, Castellane's face had gone ashen. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks out. But everyone knew what the sentence would be. Multiple life sentences, no possibility of parole. Victor Castellane would die in prison. As they filed out of the courtroom, Elena caught a glimpse of Castellane being led away in handcuffs. He looked diminished, defeated. The empire he'd built, the power he'd wielded, all of it stripped away by the truth. Outside, the celebration was immediate and overwhelming. Reporters shouting questions, supporters cheering, strangers congratulating them on the street. Catherine gave a brief statement about justice being served, about truth prevailing, but Elena was watching Isabella, who stood slightly apart from the crowd, tears streaming down her face. "Are you okay?" Elena asked, moving to her side. "I don't know," Isabella said honestly. "I did the right thing. I know I did. But he's still my father, and I just helped send him to prison for the rest of his life." "You helped stop a murderer. That's not betrayal. That's courage." "It doesn't feel like courage. It feels like loss." "It can be both." They stood together as the crowd celebrated around them, two women who'd survived impossible choices and come out the other side scarred but stronger. The sentencing 2 weeks later was almost anticlimactic. The judge handed down 7 consecutive life sentences plus 200 years for the additional charges. Castellane would never see freedom again. He was given a chance to speak before being led away. He looked at Isabella directly. "I hope it was worth it," he said quietly. "Destroying your family, your legacy, everything I built." Isabella stood, and Elena tensed, ready to support her through whatever came next. "You destroyed our family the moment you chose power over people," Isabella said clearly. "You destroyed your legacy when you built it on murder and lies. And what I did, what we all did, was make sure you couldn't destroy anyone else." Castellane had no response to that. He was led away, and that was the last time any of them saw him. The weeks after the trial were strange, a slow exhale after months of holding their breath. The media attention gradually faded. The courthouse returned to its normal rhythm. Life, impossibly, went on. Elena reopened her gallery to the public, hosting a new exhibition featuring emerging artists who'd been affected by violence and found healing through creativity. Isabella was one of the curators, having discovered a passion for helping others tell their stories through art. Adrian took control of Blackthorn Industries properly, clearing out the remnants of Castellane's influence and redirecting the company toward legitimate ethical operations. He established a foundation in his father's name, funding investigations into corruption and supporting victims of white-collar crime. Margot went back to finance but started consulting for prosecutors on complex money laundering cases. Sophia continued her security work, specializing in protecting witnesses and whistleblowers. They all carried scars. There were nights when Elena still woke up terrified, convinced that Castelaine had somehow escaped, that the nightmare wasn't over. There were days when Isabella couldn't get out of bed, crushed by the weight of what she'd done and lost. Moments when Adrian got that distant look that meant he was thinking about his father, about all the years they'd lost to lies. But they also had each other. They'd forged something in the crucible of that investigation, that trial, a bond deeper than friendship, stronger than shared trauma. They were family. 6 months after the sentencing, Adrian proposed, not with fanfare or grand gestures, but quietly, in Elena's gallery after hours. They were cleaning up after an exhibition opening, tired and paint-stained, when he suddenly got down on one knee. "I know we've been through hell," he said. "I know I hurt you, that I made terrible choices, that there's a part of you that might never fully trust me again. But I also know that I love you, that I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worth the risk, that I want us to build something together, not on secrets and protection, but on honesty and partnership. So, Elena Whitford, will you marry me?" The ring was simple, a single diamond on a platinum band. Nothing ostentatious, nothing that screamed wealth, just beautiful. Elena looked at him, really looked, at the man who'd disappeared and come back, who'd trusted her enough to let her fight beside him, who'd learned that strength meant vulnerability too. "Yes," she said, "on one condition. Anything. No more secrets, no more decisions made for my own good. We're equals in this, or we're nothing." "Equals," Adrian agreed, "in everything." They married in the spring, a small ceremony with only the people who mattered. Isabella was Elena's maid of honor. Margot and Sophia stood beside her too. The guest list was tiny, just family, found and chosen. Catherine attended along with several of the federal agents who'd helped bring down Castelaine. Even the judge who'd allowed Isabella's testimony sent a gift with a note. "Justice is served best by those brave enough to speak truth." During the reception, Isabella stood to give a toast. "A year ago, I didn't know who I was outside of being Victor Castelaine's daughter," she said, her voice steady. "I thought my identity was tied to his legacy, that I had to be what he wanted me to be. Elena taught me that we get to choose who we become, that strength isn't about following someone else's path. It's about carving your own, even when it's terrifying." She raised her glass. "To Elena and Adrian, to partnerships built on truth, to love that survives even when survival seems impossible." Everyone drank to that. Later, as the sun set over the city, Elena stood with Adrian on the balcony of the venue, looking out at the lights below. "Do you think he knows?" Adrian asked quietly. "My father. Do you think he knows that we finished what he started?" "I don't know. But I think what matters is that we know. That we didn't let his death be meaningless. We built something good out of something terrible." "Yeah, we did." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city breathe and move beneath them. Somewhere out there, Victor Castelaine was in a maximum security prison, living out his remaining years in a cell. Somewhere, Isabella was building a life defined by her own choices. Somewhere, other victims of corruption and crime were finding the courage to speak up, inspired by the story that had captivated the nation. "What do you think comes next?" Elena asked. "For us? I don't know. Normal life, maybe? Running businesses, supporting artists, having dinner with friends, being boring." Elena laughed. "We're never going to be boring." "Probably not, but we can try." "We can try," she agreed. She thought about the woman she'd been 18 months ago, heartbroken, lost, trying desperately to rebuild a life that had been shattered. She'd succeeded, but not in the way she'd expected. She hadn't gone back to who she was before Adrian. She'd become someone new entirely, someone stronger, braver, more willing to fight for what mattered. The past couldn't be undone. The pain couldn't be erased. but it could be transformed into something meaningful, something that mattered. I love you, Adrian said quietly, for who you are, for who you've become, for who you'll be tomorrow and every day after. I love you too, Elena replied. Equal partners. Equal partners, he echoed. Below them, the city continued its endless rhythm. Lives beginning and ending, stories starting and concluding, people making choices that would define their futures. And up here, two people who'd survived the worst and chosen to build something better were beginning their next chapter. Not a perfect ending, not a fairy tale where everything was resolved cleanly and neatly, but real, honest, earned. Elena leaned against Adrian's shoulder and smiled. The future was uncertain, still full of challenges and complications. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, she wasn't afraid of it. She was ready. They both were. And that was more than enough.